with a bamboo bar. Could be any island, maybe not too far. Exotic drinks we'd like you to try. Dance away the night at the Tiki Lounge.
Take two. Here we are at Merrell Fankhauser's well-known Tiki Lounge, where he produces, now on air for 20 years. He has 50 albums released and a 2011 Grammy nomination. And now he's got a Who's Who Achievement Award in entertainment. Merrell, when did this all start? How did you get started in this?
Well, I got a ukulele for my 11th birthday. My dad played guitar, 5-string banjo, and started teaching me chords. And I started writing little songs, and then of course Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins came along, and they were my heroes. So I started learning their songs, and then I got an electric guitar around 1958 and started jamming out. And I was working at a theater, the Fair Oaks Theater in Arroyo Grande, as a cleanup guy, and I set the marquee up with another person. And I was sitting in the theater before the matinee, the kiddie matinee started, playing Poor Little Fool by Ricky Nelson. The manager of the theater heard me and he said, "Hey, you play pretty good and you've got a good voice. Would you like to play a few songs for the kids in between the two matinees?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "I'll give you $12. I said, $12? Is that, I still get paid for being an usher and cleanup boy? Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm going, wow, that's great. So I got up, did 3 or 4 songs, and I was mobbed by teeny boppers, and I realized I was in entertainment. And
what was your regular pay as a cleanup guy, an usher?
I think it was $40 a week.
$40 a week?
Which was pretty good in 1960.
And now you got $12 on top of that.
$12 on top of that.
For just doing what you like to do.
Yeah. So that ended up, other theater owners heard about me, saw how we were packing the house, and so I was hired to do it in Santa Maria at the theater there, then the one in Morro Bay. We did Atascadero in San Luis Obispo.
And you were how old at that point?
I was 17.
1962.
60.
1960?
That was 1960. So a group of high school students were forming a band, and it was just at the beginning of the instrumental music craze, and I was fans of the Ventures and the Champs, and I started writing instrumental songs and putting surfing titles to them because I was a surfer. And I came up with a song that I called Kick Out, and I later changed the title of that when I got wiped out at surfing in Pismo, and my sax player saw me and he was laughing, embarrassing me in front of a bunch of pretty girls that were sitting up against the break wall. Merrell really got wiped out. I was driving home and I thought, Wipeout, that's a better title for that song. So at that time, we were playing where the Splash Cafe is now in Pismo, and it was called the Peppermint Twist West, and it was a teenage club then. The owner of the big Rose Garden Ballroom, where all the big name bands played of the day, heard us, and we were drawing so many people there that he hired us for Friday and Saturday nights and Sunday matinees. And we would bring in over 1,000 teenagers every weekend, and Delphi Records discovered us there, took us down to LA in September of '62, and we recorded the whole album in one sitting and called it Wipeout. And by the end of November, Delphi had it out, and it was in every record store in California, and then it got in stores all across the nation, and took a few years, but it became a million seller. It had some great years playing at the Rose Garden Ballroom. A lot of fun.
Those probably were your best years? When you think back over all the years, the excitement of getting 1,000 teenagers to come in and go nuts?
No, after playing 40,000 audience of 40,000 at the
It seems small.
Crater Festival, and then playing with people like Willie Nelson and Nicky Hopkins, the piano great that played on the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. I mean, there's been a lot of things that have happened, but I have fond memories of doing that instrumental, because we were one of the first bands that did instrumental surf music.
Yeah, which kind of made you what some people call the John Denver of Hawaii.
A guy in Hawaii once, when I moved to Maui, I lived there for 15 years and played all over the islands, played with Willie Nelson there. A Hawaiian guy came up to me after a gig and he says, "Hey, bro, I feel like I'm talking to the John Denver of Hawaii." And that was a big compliment to me. Well, years later, I found out John Denver and I had the exact same birthday.
The same exact
Yeah,
birthday?
yeah,
In the same year?
yeah,
Wow. I guess it fit.
yeah.
Whoever that guy was that walked up to you, there was something otherworldly about it. He just sort of made the connection.
Well, I was doing this kind of what I would call a spiritual cosmic folk rock. You know, I was doing vocals. The album that I did in 1976 was called the Maui album, and it's out on European labels, Japanese labels, American labels now, and that turned out to be a good seller for me.
So you had all these things in your head, they just sort of effervesced up and you put them to the strings?
I was so lucky that somebody would say something and it would sound like a song title to me, and it would magically, I'd hear it in my mind, music, the words, and I'd have to go write it down real quick or record it on a tape recorder so it wouldn't go away. And I met John Lennon at Harry Nilsson's house in the 70s, and I got to talk to him for a few minutes at this party, and we were talking about songwriting, because Harry put me on the spot and made me sing one of my songs, which was a little nerve-wracking when I noticed his friend John was sitting in there with about 30 other people. We were talking about songwriting, and he said, "Isn't it odd where songs come from? You never know what's going to inspire one, and if you don't get it down right away, or you hear some other music, it like erases it from your mind."
That's right.
And he called it automatic writing.
What year was that you met John Lennon at that party?
Oh gosh, it had to be around 1977 or 78.
What island was that on?
The island of Hollywood at Harry Nilsson's house.
Harry Nilsson's house.
Yes. Harry and I wrote for a publishing company, and we had adjoining offices in Hollywood in 1968, and we got paid $75 a week, but we had to hand in at least 5 songs a week.
You had to produce 5 songs a week?
Yeah.
That make you feel under pressure? Or?
No. Harry and I would go down to Ravel's restaurant on the corner of Selma and Vine, and he would make fun of the waitress, and he'd come up with some interesting songs just from spoofing this waitress and getting her to say funny things.
And she never realized how valuable she was.
I think she did, because one of the songs was called "Joy to the World, What a Beautiful Girl."
Oh.
But to me, joy was only sorrow.
Ah.
Yeah.
So you went from the Impacts. What was the next?
Merrell and the Exiles. My dad was a flight instructor at Santa Maria Airport, and he got a deal to do a flight school in Lancaster in the high desert at Fox Field. So we moved over there. I didn't like being in the desert after being here next to the ocean. I'm more of a tropical guy. And I was working in the airplane hangar, and a gentleman that worked at the airport said, "Hey, my son is learning to play guitar. Would you like to come over and show him a few things?" I was ready to play with anybody. I'd been in the desert for 5 months, left the impacts, had nobody to play with, and I went over, and there was 14-year-old Jeff Cotton. And I started showing him my surf songs and other songs that I was working on, vocals, and we decided right there to form a band. And he was in Merrell and the Exiles with me, and then later he joined Captain Beefheart's Magic Band as Antenna Jimmy Siemens. The Beefheart, Don Valide gave him that name. And then Jeff left them and joined me in Mu, that we got the name from the lost continent of Mu, that the islands of Maui and Hawaii were all thought to be the mountain peaks of the lost continent of Mu. And in 1973, we told our agents, our promoter, and the record company we were moving to Maui. And they went, "What? You got this album out that's selling?" So we moved to Maui, and I started writing Mu-inspired and Maui songs.
So that was the first Mu album.
Yeah.
And then you moved to Hawaii.
Yeah, and we did the second Mu album in our house because we met Quicksilver Messengers Services engineer, Barry Mayo, there, and he had equipment left over from their Just for Love session, and he heard us playing there and moved all this equipment into our house. We did a whole
He moved his equipment into your house so you could do your second album?
Yeah.
Well, that's a nice friend.
Yeah, well, he heard us playing at a concert there, and
he recognized value when he saw it.
Yeah, and those albums have been out all over the world on different labels.
When did that second Mu album come out? What
came out in 1970? Well, let's see, we recorded it in 74, and it sat on a shelf for a number of years because we were all enthralled with Hawaii, and I was exploring ancient pre-Hawaiian ruins, and it didn't actually, I didn't start presenting it to anybody till around 1976, and it came out first on an Italian label in 1980.
If I may deviate a little bit, what did you find interesting about those ancient Hawaiian ruins?
Oh boy, I get goosebumps still just thinking about it. An old Hawaiian guy showed me this trail that led down into this valley, and it was interesting because there were these cut stone steps that were they looked like they'd been cut on a milling machine. It wasn't, all of the Hawaiian stuff looked more like lava rocks that they just stacked together, you know. These were like machine steps. He said he used to play down there as a little kid, but he said his parents forbid him to go down there. They said, "The Mu people are going to get you and take you away," because this legend of Mu goes way back into the 1800s, and it's written in lots of books over there in the library. So
this is on the island of what?
Maui.
Maui. This is on Maui. We're talking about Maui, and we're talking about which peak? Do you remember the name of that peak?
No, we're not at any peak. We're out in the jungle on the road to Hana. This is the first ruin that I saw.
Okay.
So I went down there, and he was afraid to go down there. I came down into this valley to this pool with this pristine waterfall. I'm getting goosebumps again going down, and there were 3 pillars that almost looked Grecian with these knurled sides. One had broken off and was laying in a pool, and they were sitting on a cut stone platform. I felt like...
in the jungle?
Yes, I felt like Indiana Jones before the character was written, the distance and how tall it was. Well, I had to jump several deep chasms that I probably could have disappeared in. And I got there, and there it was, and it looked like, tried to measure it with my own body. I started climbing up it, and it must have been maybe 40 some feet tall. I got to the top, William, and I got such vertigo I thought I was going to get sick. And I very carefully got down, staggered around, and got to a vantage point where I could get a picture of it. And I got a picture of that pyramid. And that pyramid and those pillars that I took a picture of are in my book, Calling from a Star, the Merrell Fankhauser story. You've got it right there.
We're talking about this book.
Yes.
And the picture's in here.
The pictures are in there, and it tells about finding these ruins. And you can get it, the copy from Amazon, has it there for sale, and people can actually order it from me.
Yeah, we'll get it all. That's amazing. And that's Mary, and you are...
Yeah, you have that picture that you shot the other day. Mary Lee, the violinist.
And that's the waterfalls that your little hut was nearby?
No, that's one near Hana. My waterfall was more remote. This actually you can drive to off the Hana Highway.
Wow, that's... Well, let's go to your studio and look at your albums now.
Okay, we're going to go into the Ocean Records studio where we've done 15 albums, and
it's amazing. The walls are completely covered. You got to see this.
It's me on guitar, Jeff Cotton, and Randy Weimer on drums. And then you pan over here, and you got the two Moo albums that came out on United Artists, Era Records, and then on the Italian Appaloosa album. And then we moved to Hawaii, and there we are on Maui.
And you're the handsome guy there, right?
The guy in the red shirt. And here we are on the beach. Oh, look how thin I was, William. That's beautiful Baldwin Beach on Maui. And then the waterfall, I built a cabin in the jungle on land that I leased, and I lived there for quite a few years and wrote some of my best songs, I feel, there. And that waterfall was just a short walk up from my cabin. And there's the album that I wrote in the little cabin in the jungle on Maui, 1976. And that's been out on foreign labels, and it's a big collector's item also right now.
And you also got Faberdacale and a whole lot. You got Wipeout on CD here.
Yeah. And that's from 1985, A Day in Paradise. More songs I wrote on Maui. I have Steve Miller's drummer, Gary Malabar, playing drums with me on there. Peter Noon from Herman's Hermits is singing on one song. And that was a lot of fun doing that.
Okay.
Next we have the Merrell Fankhauser Message to the Universe album. And people on Maui were always talking about seeing flying saucers, and when Jimi Hendrix did his concert there, they walked through the crater, and Hendrix was very into saucers too. And people out in the jungle kept saying they would see these lights and they would land and there were little aliens. So I wrote this whole album dedicated to that, and the great artist on Maui, Gopal, did this painting of me up on the hill next to my jungle house that was down in the valley with little aliens playing with me on the album. And that album came out on a British label, and then later on a CD in the United States.
Very good. And the one to the right of that is?
That's the Dr. Fankhauser album. We came back from Maui and recorded in Hollywood I had John Cipollina of Quicksilver Messenger Service, great guitar player, playing on that one with me. Mary Lee, who played violin on the Maui album, was also playing violin, and a host of great musicians. That came out on D-Town Records, the LA-based label, and then later Line Records in Germany and a couple of other labels on CD.
Okay, and over here in the far right.
Over there, that's
corner?
the 1990 Back This Way Again album that I recorded in Hollywood at a studio with Bruce Hively as the producer, a well-known producer. And I did a sort of a 50s, 60s retro sound. And then coming down here, we have the band that I had with Ed Cassidy, the great drummer from Spirit. And it was called the Fankhauser Cassidy. And this is a double album. We did 2 albums. It sold very well, and one was nominated for a Memphis Blues Award. And then here is the William E. McEwen production, Return to Mu. I had all these songs that I'd written about the lost continent of Mu, and he said, let's do an album. And he produced the Allman Brothers, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, movies for Steve Martin, Pee Wee Herman. He had a beautiful studio in Carpinteria, and we spent several years doing 2 albums, Return to Mu and The Man from Mu. And he took that picture on the desolate side of Maui, and he still can't figure out how I levitated out of my body, because he said his camera wouldn't do a double exposure.
That's why you got that image.
Yeah.
That's a very unique image.
It happened by accident, and he still can't figure out how it did that.
I can't figure it out either.
Yeah.
Rolling.
This is my American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers certificate, ASCAP, that collects radio, movie, and television royalties quarterly. And thank God, I've been in ASCAP since 1969.
Okay, and over here?
What are you zoomed in on? I gotta know. Oh, okay. And in 1994, when Pulp Fiction, the movie, came out, I played with the Revels, and we had a song in that movie, and that caused Delphi Records to re-release our Wipeout album in 1994 on CD, and that sold very well. And then labels all around the world started releasing my other albums, Merrell and the Exiles, 60s stuff. They reissued Fapper Dockley, the valuable collector's item, on CD. And then HMS Bounty, which is another collector's item. And as you go across, you see more surf albums released on CD. All of the Mu albums were released on CD. My Maui album from 1976, released on CD. And then a California Live album that was done, recorded at some concerts, and it had surf music on it. The Message to the Universe that we mentioned on CD. Dr. Fankhauser on CD. And then a reunion album by the Impacts when Martin Brown was still alive, and it was called Eternal Surf. And then we had a song in the CD, Pulp Surfin', which was songs that were either on TV or in the movie Pulp Fiction. And then Flying to Machu Picchu, a study I did of Mayan and Incan legends. And then the first Fankhauser Cassidy Band album, solo albums, Psychedelic Dreams, and then the Haiku Jam album, Visitor from 2000 AD, recorded live in Donnie Smith's studio on Maui, returned to Moo on CD, and then Warner Brothers bought the rights to the Wipeout album from Delphi, and they put it out on CD. And that was, gosh, if my memory serves me right, might have been about 1999.
All right. What a career. What a career.
And then this is just more albums. I mean, there's a lot there. There's a best of 2 CD set. And then I'd like to mention that my TV show, Tiki Lounge, has had 2 volumes released on DVD on a British company, and there's 6 shows on each one of these volumes, and those are all still available. And then this, William, is interesting, this Eclectia album. It's on a British label, and it's all groups from the United States, Canada, and Europe that feel their music is influenced by UFOs and aliens. And they got the rights somehow to do a parody of the Sgt. Pepper's album cover for their cover. And instead of the 4 Beatles standing down here, they have aliens.
See that?
And I'm up here in the right corner by David Bowie, and Neil Young is to the left of me. So that's out now.
And then you have Signals from Malibu.
Yeah, that's a recent album I did where they were picking up these odd radio signals off of the coast of Maui, Malibu, and they kept seeing lights going in and out of the ocean. And an old Army radio engineer sent me these sounds, and I put them in some songs. That album just came out a few years ago and got quite a bit of radio play. The interesting thing was when the signals came out loud at the end of one song, it was shutting the radio stations off the air. And it turned out it was only radio stations that had new digital broadcast boards. The older stations that were analog, it didn't affect.
That's really interesting, Merle.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a tour of the studio called Oceans of Intelligence, and I think it fits with kind of this pandemic that we're going through right now. That's me on Maui in those ruins that we just talked about.
Well, I'm William Wagner for On Second Thought, and I hope Merle has given you some second thoughts. I hope you get his book. It's really worth the read. And there's photos in here you can't get anywhere else. It's called Calling from a Star, the Merrell Fankhauser story. And I doubt that most people
And the
that listen...
CD, the new
And the
CD.
CD, yeah, right.
The new CD right now, Oceans of Intelligence, you can only get it from me because all of the record companies are shut down because of the COVID-19. Hopefully by next year they'll be back up and running, but we'll have ordering info for both of these.
So as you see where to send your money to Merle for the CD and the book, I'm William Wagner for On Second Thought.
And I'm Merrell Fankhauser, here in the Tiki Lounge.
Who just got the award.
Who's Who Lifetime Achievement Award in Entertainment, and that was quite an honor.
That's quite a big honor. So, William Wagner, again, for On Second Thought, saying thanks for watching. And Willie, I hope you see this on YouTube soon. See ya.
Could be any island, maybe not too far. Exotic drinks we'd like you to try. Dance away the night at the Tiki Lounge.